Welcome everybody to the University of Applied Research and Development, our Educators podcast, and I'm delighted to be here with Therese Hoyle, who is an educational consultant and leadership consultant. She was with the Department of Education working with women leaders, and we've just found out that we're both New Zealanders, and I'm delighted about that. Therese, great to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig.
Therese, tell us about your role and what you're doing now.
Right now I've got a few roles. So I think I'm what I call a portfolio worker. So I work with women leaders in education, but in the UK. I am a coach with Integrity Coaching, who I coach women leaders in education, so mainly head teachers. I coached 7 heads last year for the National Education Union, and I also coached 10 Microsoft leaders. I've been coaching 10 Microsoft leaders over the last I think it's like 10 months, something like that. So yes, but I generally speaking work with leaders and help them in terms of supporting them with a role that at times can be very challenging, and help them really flourish in the workplace. What
are some of those challenges that you find, generally speaking, leaders encounter in a variety of workplaces?
So I think in the last few years I've just found particularly in education, there's a hugely changing landscape. So leaders, particularly in education, are having, I've coached heads over the last year who have struggled with staffing issues. They've, particularly now we've got a pandemic, leaders are struggling with huge changes and being expected to do things that they're not normally used to doing. So, with the pandemic, you've got so many changes in terms of structures, classrooms, government guidance, and sometimes we're being asked to do things that we don't feel comfortable with. So we're having to make a values judgment about whether that's right for us, and can we lead authentically. So the whole area of authentic leadership is really important, and being true to our values, because actually as leaders we become quite distressed when we're going against a grain of what we believe in. So for head teachers I know I've worked with recently, they can find themselves in their office all the time, on the phone all the time, when actually they want to be out with the children, and they want to be spending a bit more time actually walking through the corridors, connecting with their children, connecting with their staff, and actually sometimes doing a lesson, because that's what makes them happy too. So as a leader, I think you really have to find what is it that makes you happy. I've had leaders who are doing a lot of the social emotional wellbeing work, and sometimes they need to find, somebody else in their staff. They need to think about who they can hire, who can take responsibility for that area, because they're starting to wear too many hats. So actually, as leaders, it's about delegating, learning to delegate, and who can take responsibility. And when, for me, it's when I'm seeing leaders who are really distressed, it's starting to work out, what is that distress? What is starting to burn them out? Are they able to disconnect? Because there's a huge area in education where leaders are finding it very hard to disconnect. They're going home, there's emails, coming in late at night. And so actually working with them to find some boundaries. Otherwise they burn out and they don't last. And that's so sad. We're losing great people.
Do you think that that's more common in education, or is it leadership in general?
I'd say it's more common in education. Yes. Yeah. I think other structures, other organisations and the corporate world, generally speaking, there are better boundaries. Not always, but generally. I do think as heads, particularly with head teachers, they're wearing many hats, and they have huge responsibilities to the community. So they have huge responsibilities to their parents, responsibilities to their children, responsibilities to their staff. So they're wearing many hats. Yeah.
So when you're working with educational leaders and corporate leaders as well, is there a particular model that you really like that's appropriate in education?
I used to work with conventional companies, so I really still love the situational leadership 2 model. So I really am at the heart of situational leadership 2 is about partnering for performance. So if we want our teams to perform, we partner with them. And there is, I very much believe that it's not because, I know that's very much a Blanchard company statement, it's people want to perform. and when we partner with them to perform, they can. So it's about giving them the right environment. It's about, if they're not performing, we need to find out why they're not performing. If they're lacking in motivation, then maybe they need a bit more training. Maybe they're lacking confidence. So we need to partner with them to get to where they can potentially go, because everybody, I believe, has potential. And very often we're saying, oh, that person's not very good at that, or that person, can't do that. But it's maybe not because they can't or don't want to. Maybe it's because they feel they're lacking the skills to get there. So actually, it's about nurturing that talent.
When you say that people actually want to perform, when you work with leaders, do you find that that's a common or an uncommon perspective, that they believe people want to perform?
I think as educators, we all, we work with children, so we want them to perform, but sometimes we're in a high stressed environment. There's a lot of expectation maybe from parents, from governments, and actually sometimes we forget that. We forget actually that person isn't achieving what they're capable of, because maybe they're having a situation at home that's tricky, or maybe they actually lack a bit of training. Maybe they're new, and maybe they're an NQT, and actually they don't know about phonics, or maybe they lack we're putting somebody up for a new middle management role, and actually they've never led a team, and actually they need a bit of support in terms of how to lead that team. And we're seeing, we can see people going into middle leadership, some people are naturally good leaders, but some people actually need to learn to delegate a bit more, or to appreciate their team a bit more, to look for the good in their team, to celebrate them when they do well, to not, to have time to bring everybody together and communicate with them. And if there's problems, then we need to bring them up as a group and a team, and overtly sort out solutions to those problems. So I do believe that there's a lot of skill to leadership, and actually we need to be having conversations around leadership so that we can lead better.
So you mentioned Ken Blanchard's situational leadership model. Tell us a bit more about how you became familiar with that and some of your past experiences.
I was really lucky when I lived in New Zealand. I started an educational consultancy in the South Island. So basically I moved from the UK, from London, to New Zealand. I took an educational programme to New Zealand, and initially I was being told, oh, New Zealand had everything, they didn't need what I was bringing from the UK. So I was like, okay, all right. I've always done a lot of personal growth and development on myself. And I came across a affirmation, which is called I Am Enough. And it basically said, the thing that I was affirming to myself is, I'm connected to enough people to manifest my heart's desire. And I had it in the shower, everywhere, because I was being told, there's no way you're going to be able to get this program going. We've got enough programs in New Zealand. So I kept affirming to myself, I'm connected to enough people to manifest my heart's desire. And my daughter was at school in a little primary school, and the head teacher said to me, oh, we're running a head teachers conference, would you like to come and speak at it? So I put on a workshop, and I invited 30 children to come into my workshop, with all the head teachers watching me work with the children. So, and for me it was about modelling what was potentially possible with children in terms of building their social emotional wellbeing, which is something we really need right now. And from then, I then got connected with somebody in the North Island who wanted me to work with 12 resource teachers for learning behaviour and teach them how to run the educational wellbeing programme that had taken to New Zealand. And after that, it was kind of history, because it went in the New Zealand Education Gazette, and and then I was training lots of schools and teachers and leaders throughout New Zealand. So I can't remember the question anymore there, Craig, but I can't remember. What was the question again?
It's about Ken Blanchard's model and how you became familiar with it.
Yeah. So then after that, at that point as well, I was really, really interested in Ken Blanchard's work. He'd written a book about creating cultures of praise and affirmation. And that's a very big part of the work I do, is about creating positive cultures, and how to redirect when people aren't performing, how to redirect behaviour. And that's very much through looking for the good. And I contacted Ken Blanchard companies. I wanted some of their materials, and I also said, you know, if at any point you ever have any vacancies in your organisation, please let me know. And I'm, you know, I've got a coaching, I've run leadership coaching work, and so I had a long chat with the director of Blanchard, and then she said that she started following me and my work. So from, you know, I was very early in my days when I first moved to New Zealand, and I was doing that affirmation of I'm connected to enough people to manifest my heart's desire. And then so I met Bridget at that point, and so she, you know, I was new and very young at that point as well in New Zealand, and she was watching what I was doing, and she said to me later on, I called her about getting some more resources, and and then she called me back and she said, oh, we're just starting a leadership coaching program at Blanchard, would you be interested in joining us? So I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. So I just, you know, I think part of leadership is actually about, you know, we have to be doing enough personal growth and development on ourselves. You know, it's not always easy. I moved to New Zealand, to the South Island. I had no connections. I don't know anybody. All I knew is that I had a program that I wanted to develop and run nationally throughout the country, and I had no idea how I was going to start that. So I just think, you know, we all have aspirations, and we have to hold on to those. And for leaders in education, you have an aspiration for how you want your school to be. You have a vision of what is healthy, of your value. You know, I think we have to be very strong in terms of our own values, and authentically leading with our values. And that's really important. And if we become distressed as leaders if we're not living according to our values too.
Love it. It's really powerful stuff. It's good for educators and educational leaders to hear about type C goals, or big, hairy, audacious goals, or however we phrase it. Because often people get stuck and they think, how do I do this? So they never start. Whereas the how will find a way if you're willing to step out and pursue that big dream. Anyway, I love that. What an inspirational story. Hope that encourages some of our participants in the course to venture out internationally once the borders open again. That would be fantastic. Tell us about your time with the Department of Education and working with women leaders for the Department of Education.
So basically I coach women leaders. So it's actually a free program that's open to educational leaders. And so I've got various leaders who are heads. I've got some who are middle leaders. And it really is an amazing government program open to leaders in education, and it's a free program. So I give my time voluntarily to it, and I usually take one leader at a time, because it's a voluntary role. And I just think, yeah, it's great. Our leaders often need help and support, and financially it can be too much of a coaching is not always cheap, so it's kind of a free service of 6 sessions that I give to leaders. And one of my leaders at the moment, she was just posted something on Twitter saying, how just create, simple things that we have to remember too in terms of creating our own goals. And she was just putting something about actually how working with a coach helped her in terms of getting clarity around her goals. So
wonderful. Thérèse, just to finish up, would you have some, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Thérèse?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you have some career advice for leaders, people aspiring to be leaders? What are some key things you think they should try to build into the next few years?
In terms of next few years, I think personal professional development, very, very, very important. Knowing what you're really strong at, identifying your strengths, but also being aware of your weaknesses and knowing actually, I'm going to play to my strengths, but also those weaknesses, actually, how can I, fill those gaps? How can I grow and develop? So, really working out what are the professional development programs you might need to attend. If maybe you find communication difficult and being assertive, then maybe you need to do some work around that. If you find time management difficult, then and time management is all self-management. How do you develop that skill and grow that skill? If you are somebody who maybe feels you need to do everything, then actually how do you learn to delegate better? And if you find, you're brushing up against people and not having great relationships, then actually what do you need to do to grow those relationships and trust with your staff? So that's what I think. I definitely. I always think if you're in education, you need to be a lifelong learner and ready to learn and grow.
Love it. So relationships, professional development, work on interpersonal skills, and being able to delegate and share the workload.
Yeah.
Pearls of wisdom.
Thank you.
Thérèse, thank you very much for your time. On behalf of our educators that we have in Malta and Nepal and in Indonesia, it's quite an international bunch, majority in Nepal though they are teachers, they're heads of departments, vice principals, principals and directors of schools. So thank you so much. I think your wisdom applies to everybody. So I want to thank you for your time, and I did put you on the spot.
I didn't expect to do this today.
So certainly appreciate you doing this. Be safe and be well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Craig. Lovely to meet you.